Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. Oh, hold on. This will probably sound better if I actually put the microphone in front of me. Hey, everybody. A salute. Welcome, comic troopers, as you are sometimes known. Welcome to the show. This is the weekly Spinner Rack, and I'm your host, Chris. We're going to talk about some comic news this week. We're going to talk about the comics that came out this week, from the interesting to the not so great. Hint, hint, and some really fun stuff in between. And we've got a live chat. There's so much to talk about this week. It's going to be a good one. I'll do some shout outs to some folks out here. Hello to all of you. Lovely to have folks jumping in right as the show starts. Someone says that they can't believe I was at the Macy's parade. I was not. I was so frustrated. On Thanksgiving Day, and by the way, I had a wonderful Thanksgiving, in large part to the hard work and beautiful cooking of my wife. So thank you to her. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgiving. We were feeling nostalgic. Let's get the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade on. Oh, the official one by NBC, you can only watch if you have Peacock. Okay, I'll sign up. We watch it for all of 5 minutes, and then it says, like, okay, we're done streaming. I was like, what? There's no like restream? What did I just sign up for? It was crazy. Hello to all these lovely people. Oh, wow. Tyler Crook. I'm sure a lot of you know Harrow County. Hey, it's my sister. Lovely to see you as well. Hello. A girl fan. Lovely. Girl bosses. And let me talk about a few things aside from just the comic books that I'm going to review and the comic book news that I have in my super swanky, really professional PowerPoint document. This week was a new Doctor Who for the 60th anniversary, which Chrissy and I still need to see. But I'm so excited because they're adapting a comic book for the first time, or a comic strip, I guess you could call it. But I mean, it was comic book pages published by Marvel. Marvel UK published Doctor Who magazine, and Pat Mills wrote a story illustrated by Dave Gibbons. I've read it, The Star Beast. I'm so excited to see a comic that I really like, and then like the return of, like, yeah, if I'm being honest, David Tennant's my favorite Doctor. And I love Donna as his like best friend companion. So very, very cool to get to see what they do with that. I've watched a little bit of the new Scott Pilgrim on Netflix, and I was so happy to be surprised that it's a reinterpretation, a reimagining with like what would happen if Scott Pilgrim was taken out of the equation pretty early on. What happens to all the other characters? That's a really interesting idea. And it was populated with such interesting characters, but the original manga and the I called it manga, I mean a comic book, whatever. The original movie adaptation, of course, was this pretty literal adaptation, and it's all about Scott. What an interesting reimagining of that material. And then the first half of season 2 of Invincible has wrapped up for now, coming back shortly in 2024. So I did an episode on comic tropes about Invincible, which was a different type of episode. I did what I'm calling a roundtable discussion. I had on a Comic Drake and Godzilla Mendoza. They were kind enough to clear some time out of their schedules and do an episode with me where it was really fun to get to talk to other people that know the material and get to like riff on that a little bit. By the way, I'll give you a behind the scenes. When I was recording it, the internet on my end kept going out. It went out at least 4 times. And so those guys patiently waited the basically 3 or 4 minutes for my stuff to reset. Oh, so embarrassing. But I really appreciate what those guys did. Really appreciate that. Proofreader Chris, exactly. Disclosing how close I am. Yeah, Radiant Black is a really good comic, and I think that overall if you like Invincible, there's a really good chance that you'll like Radiant Black. So I think that was a good recommendation when we finally stumbled upon that recommendation when we were trying to think of other things. But that's a lot of preamble. Let's get into talking about the news that's come out in the past week. I think I've got some pretty diverse stuff. There we go. Nailed it on that thumbnail as always. Oh, this is some really serious stuff we've got to talk about. Maybe this will invite some new people to check this out. I don't know. How would I rate the Scott Pilgrim anime? I want to finish it before I come up with a full rating. I've only gotten like a third into it. So far, though, I'd call it at least a B plus. Let's see if it sticks the landing and if it goes in some more interesting directions. A little bit of coffee to perk me up. All right, let's get into it. This is overall, I think, some positive news. It's following up on a news piece that we had last week where Opus, a comic publisher from the UK who had an American branch and who published a bunch of comics, including the licensed Frank Frazetta universe comic book stuff, they made a statement this week talking about how they're pledging to catch up on some unpaid stuff. Oh, look at this. Thank you for the super chat. Only Cyber Monday I am buying is a super chat. Well, lovely. Thank you very much. Boy, that gets me thinking. I haven't done any of my holiday shopping for my family yet. I'm really stumped this year. But thank you for the super chat. That means a lot to me, Steve. I really do appreciate it. Helps. Let's get into this news. So this came up, to recap, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about. Artist Sadat Ozgen, and I'm probably mispronouncing that. It's like a German name, which I don't really know German. But anyway, Sadat said that he hadn't been paid by Opus for various Frank Frazetta comics he did. In the wake of that, Sarah Frazetta pledged, hey, we're not going to let any more of our licensed books be published until we're sure that the creators who've already worked on what's come out have been paid. I think that's a good first step. The post by Sadat was backed up by some other people who said they haven't been paid. Hammerfall artist Kevin West, the colorist on that book, Carlos Cabrera, Thomas Tenney has done some work for Opus. They all posted on social media some pretty long stories that I didn't really think was necessary to recap, but it is backing up that like they're like, hey, I like the editors I'm working with. I like the work, but I also haven't been paid. What's going on? So to summarize, and if you want to read the full statement, Opus released a statement to Bleeding Cool. You can read it there. It came out this week. But essentially, what they did is they pledged that they will be paying all the talent that they owe. They explained that it's essentially due to restructuring. You know, they closed sort of the U.S. branch, and they're going through some, restructuring on their company's head. And they were upfront. They said, look, it's not something we can fix in a single week, but we are going to fix it ASAP. And I hope that's true. For what it's worth, they have not solicited any new Frank Frazetta comics or any new licensed comics in February. So we know that, like, going forward, they have put things on pause. I'm sure that that's a little tough for the people that like reading these stories, but it's a lot tougher for the talent. In comics, you draw a comic, you send it to the publisher, or you send it probably to a series of people. Like if you're the writer, the penciler or something, it still has to get inked and lettered and colored and proofread and, set for printing and printed and distributed and sold. And then the money comes to the publisher, and then the publisher pays you, what you owe, what you're owed. It's a waiting game. So it's pretty tough. Oh, cool. Another super chat? Ooh, I must be doing something right. If everyone watching could give a like to the channel, it really helps the channel and Chris. Well, that's true. That's true. That's something that's free. So if you were so inclined to be kind, it means a lot to me if you just take 2 seconds to hit that thumbs up button that's right underneath the video. Really appreciate it. But thank you for the super chat, Michael. Very, very kind of you. Yeah, the new Ultimate Comics look very interesting. I'm especially interested in Spider-Man, an older Spider-Man, and I'm curious to see whatever Peach Momoko does with X-Men. It looks like she's been given free reign to, maybe mix in some mythology of her own. So we'll see. We'll see. Thomas Tenney of Forceworks. I didn't double check, but that's entirely possible. How many Thomas Tenneys can be artists in the industry, after all? Number 9 for hitting the like. Thank you. Thank you very much. This isn't related to comics, but did you hear about the director of 47 Ronin pocketing millions of dollars that Netflix gave him to make a TV series? It's hilarious. He spent a lot of it on Dogecoin. No, I didn't hear that. That sounds bonkers. I haven't read it yet. I picked up the issue 1, and but it was like in the wake of me coming back from pretty long trip, so I'm still a little backed up on a few comics. I haven't prioritized it, which probably isn't a great sign, but I'm curious. I'll read it. How do I start reading these new Marvel Ultimate Comics? Can I buy old issues? Can you buy the most recent? Well, that's a good question. Look, let's be clear. Marvel is using the term Ultimate Comics for branding, okay? It is not truly a continuation of their Ultimate Comics from the past. So the short answer is you can absolutely pick up the new comics, which haven't come out yet. They're about to come out, but they haven't come out yet. So you can pick up the new stuff, and you're starting from scratch. Spider-Man, Black Panther, X-Men, they'll all have Ultimate Universe editions, and they're all starting from scratch. So yeah, it's intended to be a jumping on point for new readers. Good luck with that. We'll see. Gods is awesome. Okay. We're barely into it, Arsnoff. I'm getting a slow start. Don't worry, guys. You haven't missed much. Let me get back into the news, and we'll talk about the second item that I have. Fantagraphics is teaming up with Marvel for some sort of like reprints, basically, and they're going to have something on Free Comic Book Day. So specifically, Fantagraphics and Marvel are teaming up to publish copies of Marvel's Atlas era, their 1950s era. That Marvel was called Atlas briefly. They were Timely for a long, long time. Then they were briefly Atlas, and then in the 60s they became Marvel Comics. But the Atlas horror stuff is kind of forgotten because it's sort of a brief period of time, and they haven't used a lot of the stuff from that era. They also did some sci-fi, and they've used a few of the sci-fi things that they did. Groot came back, for instance. But their horror stuff is largely forgotten, and yet they did have some good talent working for them at that era. They really did. So this is potentially interesting. They're going to have a Free Comic Book Day edition. I think that will be a good sort of sampler to see if this is the kind of thing you want to buy one of their, like nice thick reprint editions that's coming. So yeah, I think, Xavier, if something like this Atlas horror edition does well, I think that there's a great chance that they would do monsters next. So will they use Ben-Day printing? They probably are, like, scanning from the original archived work to reprint at this point. Let's see. Phil, thank you so much for the super chat. Wow, I'm doing all right. Have I ever considered doing a comic tropes on P. Craig Russell? Absolutely, I've considered it. Absolutely. Really beautiful illustrator. When I think of P. Craig Russell, I think of something sort of gentle and natural. There's a lot of really lovely artwork there. I think the only time I've really touched on him was talking about Sandman, because I talked about an issue that he drew. But yeah, we'll see. Yes, Free Comic Book Day is still in May, so this is talking about the future. I did have in this note here, by the way, that this Atlas edition will have a somewhat well-remembered story for within this realm of obscure material. Uh, there was a Stan Lee written story, Joe Maneely illustrated story that was a satire of Frederick Wertham, who, of course, wrote Seduction of the Innocent, really started things down a path towards the comics code getting implemented and, in my opinion, stunting American comics growth for quite a long time. So, an interesting little story within that. They while Fantagraphics solicited this, they also solicited a bunch of other upcoming sort of trade paperbacks and big comics. I wanted to point two out that sounded very interesting to me. One is a graphic novel called Search and Destroy, which is apparently a modern retelling of Osamu Tezuka's manga Dororo, which is like kind of an adult story. That was like an early one where Tezuka was starting to go like, I think he was honestly getting jealous of some of the attention of some of the manga creators that were doing more adult stuff. Like Shigeru Mizuki was starting to get some attention. And so his response to that was Dororo, which sort of goes from Edo period into like the far future. I don't know. There's a lot to talk about there. It's probably too much for me to break down. But yes, like some people saying, love Dororo. Oops. What about Don Rosa? Thank you for the super chat. Entirely a possibility. I'm probably more likely to cover Carl Barks first, but I would like to talk about Gorora. Don Rosa. I'm just mixing everything up. Gekiga. Yes, that's what this is. His stab at Gekiga. Exactly. His one of his early stabs. I think he did a bunch. And it was good. It was cool seeing Tezuka push himself in new directions. I think if there's anything I didn't talk about in my Tezuka episode, I wish I talked about how he was probably a little jealous of the success of others, but that pushed him to try new things, which is good in a way. There's also a book that Fantagraphics has coming out, which will be an analysis, like just an analysis of the first 50 issues of Love and Rockets. I can't say enough good things about Love and Rockets. It's definitely well regarded, but I still think it flies under the radar of a lot of comic book readers. But it's very well done, and it's very consistent, and it's just a very impressive comic that really grows with its reader. So yeah, I think a lot of people would like it. I wish there was more Gekiga or modern version Gekiga in mangas. Well, to be clear, Pluto is a great example of that. That's Naoki Urasawa updating Tezuka's Astro Boy or Mighty Atom, whichever you prefer, for a modern audience and making it very grounded and turning it into a Gekiga. And I was impressed with Netflix's adaptation of that. If Netflix wants to do one season shows like Pluto and Scott Pilgrim, where I don't need a season 2 or anything, I'd be very happy with adaptations like that. I really would. Yoshihiro Tatsumi and Tezuka had a famous disagreement over Gekiga. I need to read up more on that. I should have included stuff like that. Anyway. So, I'll move on. But I thought this looked like an interesting one for Free Comic Book Day, and there's some stuff coming from Fantagraphics I'm looking forward to. And I'm not done talking about Fantagraphics. Let's talk about some big news that's going on with Fantagraphics. I really could have talked about this more last week, but let's break it down. First of all, Fantagraphics published this book that you see on the right called My Favorite Thing is Monsters by Emil Ferris. It is a very cool graphic novel, really dense ballpoint pen illustrations over lined paper, so it looks unlike most stuff that you come across, but it's great. And it's about monsters, but also like the author's love of classic sort of 50s era monsters. Yeah. it it's hard to simply break down in a video like this where it's live. It did make my top 10 list of the year that it came out. It's a great book. If any of you have read it, you're going to agree. It's a great book. But there's some drama behind the scenes regarding it. Because when Emil Ferris was shopping the book around, Fantagraphics made an offer that Ferris liked, and they published this book. And originally, when it was pitched, it was so big, the Fantagraphics was like, we need it. It's too big as this, like we're going to publish it like a little bit smaller. And Ferris agreed with that and started revisions so that it would be basically 2 books. But Emil Ferris has argued that the contract she signed with Fantagraphics was just for the first book, and that the rest of the stuff that they had seen was in a rough manuscript form and was not intended to be the continuation. It was just where the story was going, and the plan was to revise it into a full book 2. But Fantagraphics has a different interpretation of the contract, and this book sold very, very well. So they're in a lawsuit right now. They're in a lawsuit over who has the rights to publish the second book. So, yeah, that's the summary there. I could have put that up on screen. Sorry. For what it's worth, this book is currently solicited through Fantagraphics to come out in April. You could pre-order it on Amazon, for instance, or talk to your local comic book store first, obviously. But like I'm saying, Emil Ferris argues that is not the version of the book that I intended to put out there. That's technically a continuation, but the story has changed, and I've changed most of the pages, and that's not the complete version. And she's saying I have the right to go to another publisher for any future books. So recently, this is the info that came out this week. I've been looking at some of these court filings and following this news. The court filings have disclosed that Ferris has made at least $450,000 in royalties. So this is obviously a very successful book. When you're approaching $500,000 in royalties, imagine how much revenue that is. So I can understand to some degree that that should give you leverage to say, if I didn't give you, first of all, I don't believe I gave you the rights to publish the sequel. That's not my intended version. And with this, you could probably go get a brand new deal for book 2 at any publisher and get a bigger royalty paycheck because they know it's going to do well. So anyway, that was interesting to come across, that Emil Ferris has earned at least $450,000 from this. My buddy Randy is here, and he says that he's made nearly 450,000 doll hairs. Very close, and yet so far apart. Randy, I know you've got another Kickstarter coming soon, this time for some sort of a horror book. What's that one called again? Go ahead and type that here, bud. I forget. Something like Poor Old Miss West? Am I getting that right? Lawsuits are tricky. I have no idea what's for dinner. Probably leftovers, though. Let's see. I never thought Fantagraphics published books would sell so well it would make that much for an author. So there's some very successful Fantagraphics books. Absolutely. I had it right. Poor Old Miss West. So Randy's about to launch Kickstarter that you could sign up now to be notified. It's called Poor Old Miss West through Altruist Comics. Randy has done about 6 or 7 successful Kickstarters for his comics. Always fulfills them within a few months. Really, really good. I love that book. Nice to see you, Marvin Nation. I agree. It's a really good book. For if nothing else, Go out and get this book if you haven't read it. You know how much I'm worth? 144 million. I'm an athlete. I'm the Infinity Hero VP of Earth. Well, congratulations. That's pretty good. I'm worth 50 doll hairs in Randy accounting. Hey, speaking of books that have sold well, Transformers #1 is approaching 200,000 units in sales. That's huge. That's really big. And honestly, while we've had like record sales, before for certain books, even if you go back to the 40s and the 50s, yes, there were more books that sold generally higher units and stuff, but there were also like a lot of returns and things like that. And 200,000 would always be a good number in any era of comics. Let's talk about what 200,000 in sales means. Meets the eye, what it means. Just to be clear, this is including the variants and the reprints and worldwide sales. But yeah, Transformers #1 is approaching 200,000. I don't know the exact number. It's really close, though. In the same shared universe, Void Rivals #1 by Robert Kirkman and Lorenzo De Felici. Issue 1 has had 5 printings now, and that's hitting 150,000 copies, which is also nothing to sneeze at, especially since that's not based on a property that anybody knew about before. That's based on probably just Robert Kirkman's name, right? So, also in this shared new Energon universe, I'm doing hand quotes a lot tonight. That's okay. Duke #1 is going to land December 27th. So that's a month from now. Cobra Commander #1, January 17th. Will we see similar numbers from that, from G.I. Joe? G.I. Joe is popular, but it's never been quite as popular as Transformers. So I don't know. At the same time, they've got some top tier talent, and obviously there's a lot of people reading this stuff. So if it can even cross 100,000, that's a lot. Are these selling out, or do we see these numbers as shops try to get the 1 in 100 variants, etc.? We are talking about, what's sold out at the distributor level, but if it's going to second, third, fourth, and fifth printings, I think it's pretty safe to assume that the majority of the regular issues have either sold out or there's a handful that are slabbed in a store. But, like they must be selling out when you get to like a fifth printing. Yeah, we talked about G.I. Joe Real American Hero last week. It did sell out on the distributor level for whatever they sold it at, and it's going back for a second print. So, by the way, I really like the Transformers book so far. It's great. It's really fun. Really, really fun. These numbers are the most that any Hasbro comic has ever sold. So we're talking, Transformers or G.I. Joe in the 80s when they were at Marvel. Those were big sellers, by the way. They really were. At a certain point, obviously it dropped off and it got canceled, but at a certain point, they were very good sellers. They never approached these numbers, though. They never approached these numbers. And basically, the closest thing you could say for like sort of a new shared universe in terms of sales numbers, you'd have to go back to 2011's New 52 from DC to get close to this. So this is definitely making some waves. It's getting a lot of readers on board. Will they all stay? Like, how long will they stay? When will the series drop but plateau and then maybe pick up again? I don't know. That will be the next piece of information that we need to see how successful it is. But initially, there's a lot of interest in this if they need to keep reprinting it. There haven't been any updates on the Fables stuff, so don't know. That's an amazing start. Yeah, and you got to be involved, DJ. You had a beautiful variant cover with Starscream. I'd bet cash money they stay as long as DWJ does. I hope that Skybound is ready to open up, just back up a Brinks truck full of money to Daniel Warren Johnson to get him to stay on this, because I believe his initial plan was to only draw it for the first 6 issues and then maybe stay on as a writer for a while. I think that was the initial plan. But yeah, I mean, you're going to have to get like somebody like really, really talented to keep with it. but Daniel Warren Johnson's doing something new with it, and it's exciting and fun. Yeah, drawing the first 6. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Beep, beep, beep. Oh, Ryan Audley would actually be a very good choice now that you say that. That's not a bad idea, in fact. You know, if Daniel Warren Johnson wanted to move on to draw something else, first of all, at least get him to stay as the writer. I think he's doing some good stuff as the writer. But Ryan Audley as an artist would be a really good choice, actually. His variant cover showing Optimus Prime, like really smashing through Starscream, and there's just little bits going everywhere. That's a good fit. If he wants to do something like that. You know, drawing robots is a lot different than drawing people. That's not a bad idea. Sean Gordon Murphy would also be good, and he's drawn similar types of things in what was that book he did with, I want to say, Grant Morrison. It was about a kid going into a diabetic coma, and he imagined himself going into a world full of his toys, and it had, like, you know, Transformers and other popular 80s toys. What was that comic called? It looked great. It's not coming to me, but Sean Gordon Murphy, if you want to look up his history. Oh, thanks. Joe the Barbarian. Joe the Barbarian is a really good looking, cool comic. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so there are some other artists that I think would fit what kind of look and tone they have right now, but, you know, you're going to have to pay them, especially if they're making this kind of money. We'll see. I'll keep moving so that I can get on to talking about comics and maybe even have time to draw. I thought it was worth noting that some original comic art has sold for some really big money over the last basically week and a half. And I just have 3 pieces I wanted to point out to that effect. 2 of them are here. One of them we talked about last week. Thanks for jumping in. Thank you. So, here we go. I'm summarizing it. So these are all auctions for original art. They've all gone through heritage auctions for what it's worth. First, over here on the right, this is by Don Heck. It's the first on-panel appearance of Iron Man. Pretty important character, obviously. That's from Tales of Suspense number 39, and that went for $336,000. Pretty impressive when you consider, like, Don Heck was, I don't think anybody's, like, favorite superstar artist. He was better than a workman-like guy, but I just don't think Don Heck was ever, like, a superstar. I think Marvel was glad to have him because he could draw in a house style, hit his deadlines. He was good, you know, he was solid. So I think that's mostly about Iron Man, you know. This over here, that's promo art for Dark Knight Returns, and that sold for $210,000. And that probably would have sold a lot longer ago, but that was owned by some DC executive who claimed it had gotten lost. Maybe he really did think it was. When he passed away, his widow was going to auction it, and Frank Miller's like, well, wait a minute, that art should have been returned to me. They resolved things behind closed doors. They came to a settlement agreement. So I don't know exactly what that was, but finally this was able to go to auction, and that sold for $210,000. And of course, last week we talked about the infamous, but infamous is still well known, Captain America promo piece, the one with his big old breast muscles, his pectorals that go out, like, you know, 2 times past where his head should be or something. That sold for $132,000. So we're talking about 6 number figures for pieces of artwork. It really would make me curious to see, you know, what if we saw, I don't know, like Watchmen pages go up, or you know, first Spider-Man pages by Todd McFarlane. Like, what numbers would those be fetching right now? I think that these are people that are investing as compared to pure fans that have money, but I don't know. That's good that you enjoy Don Heck. I hope I didn't come down on him too hard with how I was trying to describe him. I have nothing bad to say about Don Heck. I just don't think that people got as excited about Don Heck as guys like, at the same time, Jack Kirby. Just my 2 cents. I don't know. His Happy is my favorite portrayal of him. Well, that's fair. That's fair. All right, we're going to move on. We've got an update for the Akira live action. What can I say? Sometimes I don't think things necessarily need to be translated into other mediums. The Akira manga and anime are fantastic. I wouldn't be against another anime adaptation, maybe as like a whole season of a TV show so that it could really adapt everything that was in the comic. I don't think a live action version is really anything I need. It could be done well, I suppose, but it doesn't excite me. Just on a personal level, it doesn't excite me. But there is a little bit of an update this week. So first of all, Taika Waititi has been attached as the director for quite a while. Obviously, the Akira project has gotten backed up as he's worked on other things. But he was interviewed by Inverse this week, and Taika said that he's still working on Akira and that it's likely to be his next film after what he's making right now, which is called Clara and the Sun. I've got a quote from him. Taika said, quote, "Obviously, I think people who love the film, I want to make sure that they've also read the books because there's a lot more in the books than there are in the film." He's talking about the animated film. And some people are very protective over the film, which is not quite the same as the books. So we're drawing a lot from the books. Great, but you can still only fit so much into, even a 2.5 hour type movie. There's a lot to the comics that was taken out for the animated film, just to be clear, a lot. I really recommend picking up that manga. I mean, if you watch Comic Tropes, you see that Akira box set is always in the background of my shot. I just don't think, I don't know. If they told me it was a live action TV show, I might be a little more excited because Akira is an epic that I don't think would translate all that well to a movie. That's my opinion. A 6-hour movie. Even at 6 hours, you're still cutting stuff, though. You would still be cutting stuff. It's good that he's actually acknowledging the source material. Definitely true. And I've liked a lot of what Taika Waititi's done, but still. Yeah, I think that there were like cracks in Taika's work that like indicated to me that it may have been Jermaine Clement that was like, carrying some of his earlier work. Certainly What We Do in the Shadows was excellent, but I was like, how much of this is Taika? How much is Jermaine? Thor Ragnarok was very good, but yeah, Thor Love and Thunder, I'll call it average. I don't think it's bad. I've heard that his current movie isn't that good, but I did like Jojo's Rabbit. I did like that. Edgar Wright might have been okay for this. Yeah, he might have been. I didn't know about any of that news Mongo do. We'll see. Yeah, he probably did, but yeah. What else? Sunrise is making an Akira series, animated series. Okay, that's not a bad idea. That's an adaptation I could get into if it's done well. Oh, I did like Hunt for the Wilder People. That's true. Well, we'll see. Steven Spielberg once said that Akira is not adaptable to the big screen. It really might not be. Some stories are too big for just one condensed version, I don't know. Also, generally Taika Waititi does like to inject some humor into everything he's done so far. And I don't think Akira, it can have some lightheartedness with the character dialogue, but it is not a light story in any way. And you can't undercut the drama and the stakes with too many quips or jokes or gags. I would say that that's a part of what brought Thor 4 down, is that it was like a little too silly sometimes. But anyway, it's still in the works. Let's talk briefly about something a little bit funny. Luffy deflating. There's not a lot to this news story. You kind of just, this image is kind of telling you the story. But to be clear, this was the first year that there was a one-piece balloon in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. It's here, Monkey D. Luffy. I think it looks like a great balloon. It's got, a good pose. It's animated in terms of like his reaction. I think he looks kind of cute and likable and everything. But his straw hat, when it was inflated, stuck out to either end like it's supposed to. And as it was going down the street, it got snagged on a tree branch at one point and it punctured the outside. Now, fortunately, a lot of these balloons are compartmentalized just for something like this. So, yes, his hat rim deflated. It didn't stick out straight. And it looks like he's wearing some sort of a bucket hat, like he's going to go out fishing or something like that, like a fisherman that puts the hooks in that bucket hat. But he did go through most of the parade like this. The balloon did continue throughout the parade with his sad floppy hat. He just didn't really look right with his hat like this. I mean, it's the Straw Hat Pirates. The hat is fairly iconic as far as the look of Monkey D. Luffy. Yeah, the straw bucket hat crew. Bucket hats are underrated. Well, maybe, but I don't think that this is going to inspire Aichiro Oda-san to reimagine the next few chapters. He's like, oh my God, forget Gear 5, Luffy. I want to make a Luffy with a big floppy hat. Why didn't I ever think of this? But good for them for continuing. There have definitely been worse things that have happened to balloons over the years at the Macy's parade. I remember Barney popped and deflated. I remember Sonic the Hedgehog popped and deflated. I think he even bumped into like building windows and everyone's like, whoa. I think Garfield deflated one year, if I'm remembering right. Is there anything else? There's a pretty infamous photo that's real of the balloons lining up and getting ready for the parade where Uncle Sam is, like just laying down and Spider-Man was the next balloon up and his head is all the way up Uncle Sam's ass. It looks like Spidey's just going to town, like making a lunch out of Uncle Sam's ass. I hit the thumbs up. It took me 1.4 seconds. I appreciate the 1.4 seconds of your time. Thank you. At least no kids were traumatized by Luffy's hat deflating. Probably not. Good point. Yeah, definitely not on the same level as Barney collapsing. Okay, it sounds like not everybody knows about this Spider-Man and Uncle Sam. So I'm going to pull that up so that you know exactly what I'm talking about. Hold on 2 seconds. Let me add something. This is good. There it is. Whoops. There's Spidey having a good Thanksgiving meal ahead of everybody else. It's just the balloons getting ready for the parade, and Spidey's like, America's ass. So that's something every single Thanksgiving for I don't know how many years, I always share this image on Thanksgiving Day, followed by video of the Marvel float from 1989 featuring all the superheroes and supervillains fighting. My favorite part is at one point, Captain America throws Dr. Doom into an electrified wall and RoboCop steps out and turns the electricity off. Why is RoboCop hanging out with the Marvel characters? Why did RoboCop help Dr. Doom? The first part is that Marvel had the rights to RoboCop comics at the same time. And the second is they just needed to move the show forward. I'll get back to the news, but thank you for letting me indulge in some very silly stuff. Spidey loves America more than Cap. Yeah. Mephisto can never take this away from Spidey. I know. I got to cover Next Wave someday. Wait, what did I miss? Oh yeah, something human centipede. The 89 float made the rounds after your stream. I wondered if you were the catalyst for it getting posted so much. I don't know. I share it every single year because it's just amusing to me. Plus, it has the music from Back to the Future, and that's 1989 when both Back to the Future 2 and 3 came out. So everyone knew what that music was, and yet the Marvel superheroes are fighting to it. So, yeah. Yes, RoboCop literally wrestled in a match, tag teaming with Sting. They pretended like he just existed, and he wrestled with Sting. It's crazy. There's also a pretty funny Korean TV ad for fried chicken where RoboCop comes out of the TV and steals the chicken. He's like, it's good. RoboCop. Speaking of One Piece, they're collaborating with the LA Rams. Yes, welcome back to the NFL Minute with Chris. So, this is this coming weekend. Right? Wait. Yeah. This coming weekend, December 3rd, in LA, the Rams are playing the Cleveland Browns, and basically the sort of sponsor or collaborator for this is One Piece. Here's some of the things they're going to do. There's going to be digital signs inside the stadium and posters outside of SoFi Stadium. There will have random spectators will have their image projected within a wanted poster, wanted for 30 million berries. And so that'll be projected on their huge screen for everybody. That's kind of fun. Every attendee gets a towel, a body towel, branded with LA Rams and One Piece. That sounds like a decent collectible. And then the first 10,000 people to get in will also get a clear One Piece tote bag that I guess has some like One Piece collectible card game in. So if you are an LA Rams and a One Piece fan, this is the game you want to go to. But I can't think of any other manga or comic book teaming up for an actual game day thing. I mean, there've been like clothing branding deals, but this is the first time I can think of a manga or a comic book basically being the sponsor and collaborator for a full game. So kind of a big deal. Certainly expensive to get this much branding out there and have all these giveaways. Like I don't know how big SoFi Stadium is off the top of my head, but it's got to be at least 20,000 fans. I mean, so what? They must have made like at least 30,000 body towels, something like that. As a Rams fan, I love this in-your-face Buccaneers and Raiders. Well, that is true. I got to say, it's interesting that they collaborated with the Rams just because being Pirates, that's exactly what I was thinking, and I was going to go there. Why not have teamed with probably the Raiders would make the most sense, but the Buccaneers would have made sense too. Anyway, just kind of interesting. But that's the thing that's happening this weekend. So if you're watching the game, the LA Rams game, I bet you see One Piece posters and signs all over the place. And I think that like the attendees at the stadium will also be being shown little like video clips of like One Piece animation stuff. So we'll see. Oh, 70,000 capacity? That's way bigger than I realized. What was I thinking? Wow. Think of that. That means they're making, you got to account for like sort of like loss and damages and stuff. So they probably made at least 100,000 of those body towels. Wow. That can't be cheap. Yes, it's the Las Vegas Raiders these days. Isn't One Piece one of the most popular manga anime series ever? Maybe that is why. Of course, that's why. Yes, it absolutely is. It's super popular. It's incredibly popular worldwide. That's absolutely why they're doing this. It just still like a lot of money. A lot of money. The bucket hat and ears. Maybe the Luffy sad balloon will just sort of slowly deflate across the stadium at halftime. That'll be the halftime show, is just like popping Luffy over the over everything. We'll talk about more comic book stuff. Garth Ennis. Garth Ennis is writing the new James Bond 007 comic through Dynamite. That's a pretty big name. And he gave a couple thoughts on why he's doing it. So, this came from an interview with Comic Book Resources this past week. One thing that was interesting is he said that he was offered this book 10 years ago, but at the time he didn't really know James Bond all that well, other than sort of watching the movies and in his opinion saying that they were pretty forgettable. He said like the character didn't really do much for him after watching the movies, and the only thing he could think of to do with it was more like parody, which is what, you know, in part inspired his book Jimmy's Bastards, which is like a character like James Bond has bedded all these women after his adventures, means he's left a lot of kids out there in the world. But what changed? Something changed. This is a quote from Garth Ennis. He says, "What I saw when I looked at the novels, as well as Warren Ellis's rather nifty update of the character in his comics, was a ruthless and deadly individual who hides his lethality behind a veneer of charm. Ultimately, he's the British establishment's killing machine, and therefore rather a nasty piece of work, which is very much my department." We'll see. Alan Moore wrote James Bond? I don't remember that. Unless you're saying he wrote an analog or something like that. He's too Irish to get into an English spy story? Well, Pierce Brosnan's Irish. Pierce Brosnan was a really good James Bond. You might not even love every movie that he was in, but I think he was a very good James Bond. I think an Irish guy can definitely play James Bond. Let's see. Rams does make sense considering the Straw Hats' first ship had a ram's head. That's true. The Going Merry did have a ram's head. That's pretty good. Muhammad, you got a good point there. Sounds very similar to Jimmy Bond of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Is that what it is? League of... Yeah, he was sort of unnamed in there, but right. Yeah, you guys are talking about that. Got it. Grant Morrison. Jeez. Well, they would take it in some interesting directions. I would imagine they would take it in some interesting directions. I don't know if that's a good fit. Who knows? Anthony Starr? Boy, I don't know. It's hard to say. He's really despicable as Homelander, I will say, and that's good acting. He is despicable as that character. You want to see overweight potato couch James Bond? Right here, baby. Here's my audition. I'm coming in, just standing in front of the producers of the next James Bond movie, and they're like, can you give us your name and your age and your line reading of James Bond's classic opening line? And I go, yeah, happy to. Chris, age undisclosed. Here we go. Hi there, James Bond. Do you think I have it? I mean, Daniel Craig to this guy, and then hopefully I can use that notoriety to get into the MCU as Paste Pot Pete. I'll be the first guy to leverage James Bond into Paste Pot Pete. That's my path. That's my path to success. Wait, I missed it. Sorry. Isn't a parody of Bond Austin Powers? One of them. There's lots of parody stuff out there. He was great in Banshee. I never saw that show. He was good in the horror movie recently, but he was also a pretty bad guy in that too. I feel like Michael Fassbender might be getting a little too old for where I think you should. I think you should get a guy right around 35 maybe to play James Bond. I don't know how old Fassbender is right now. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, that was that. Hi there, James Bond. His classic introduction. Coffee, thanks. Boy, was there a lot of talk on social media about this new AI manga based on Osamu Tezuka's famous character, which doesn't necessarily mean anything, but we'll see. I'll shorten this down. Tezuka Makoto, that's the son of Osamu Tezuka, who runs Tezuka Productions or something like that. It's basically, has the rights to his father's characters. Well, Makoto and the Keio University professor Kurihara Satoshi, she's an expert in artificial intelligence. They held a news conference together this week at Keio University in Tokyo. Basically, what's happening is they're using AI to draw a new Blackjack manga chapter. Blackjack is a Tezuka character, if you don't know, who's basically a world-class surgeon, unlicensed, but like the best surgeon, doctor guy ever. And he travels the world solving medical mysteries. Maybe like that show House, I think. I never saw it, but something along those lines. They showed things like how they used AI to design new characters that would look like they had been drawn by Osamu Tezuka. They'd get like all sorts of different versions and fine tune it, this, that, and the other. And they talked about how impressive all the technology was. And they're doing this because, yeah, it's the 50th anniversary of a famous character. But the social media response was terrible. Like, I didn't see anybody excited about it on social media. Like, literally no one. Instead, what I saw was like confusion going like, there have been Blackjack mangas drawn by other mangaka, and sometimes they even look like a similar style to Osamu Tezuka. Why wouldn't you celebrate the anniversary using a great artist or something like that? And if you look at the pages, they don't look weird. Okay. They've cleaned them up. They probably used an artist to work on top of the AI or something like that. To be honest, there's probably, I would think, a ghost artist or two working on top of the AI. So it looks like Tezuka. It does. It legit doesn't look weird. I looked at the 5 pages that they previewed of this 32-page story. It does not look bad, for the record. But it's just confusing why they wouldn't use an actual creator. Like that seems to be the response. On top of that, some of the people that are really big experts on Blackjack's manga history pointed out that this is probably not what Tezuka would have wanted, because he did a Blackjack story where a hospital was controlled with an AI intelligence, and the end result was that the human Blackjack was still a better doctor for his patients, and the AI acknowledged that and like decided to retire itself from trying to be a doctor. I mean, that was done in like the 70s, I want to say. So I feel like he already told his story about how he feels about AI in Blackjack itself. That's an actual story you can read. His son said, well, my father always said he wished he had more hands so that he could produce even more than he was producing. And if, the AI can produce stuff that looks like his, I think he would have liked this technology. But I just don't agree. I don't agree. His son probably knows him better than I do, of course. Probably. Of course he does. But still, just strange. Yeah, I think an anthology with like the top tier mangaka would be a much more exciting way to celebrate Blackjack's 50th anniversary. If you told me that, the teams that are working on some of the best books today, like, take Chainsaw Man and My Hero Academia and Tokyo Revengers, and had them all do like, 8-page Blackjack chapters or something, I'd be like, yeah, I'm all in, baby. Callisto's figured it out. Now you just need to create an AI that can read the manga as well as we can read. And there you go. You've cut out the middleman. You can have the computers generate and read the whole thing. Done. Using AI art in anything professional is just cringe. I'm glad the response has been almost entirely negative so far. AI doesn't seem any more valuable than NFTs. Here's the only thing I'll add to this, guys, and gals and all. This is social media, which is a bit of a closed environment, right? The bottom line is, will this sell? Will people want to buy this that don't know the full story of how it was created? Are they just going to pick it up and go, that was good, I like this? Because that's going to carry more weight than any discussion. Oh yeah, I admire Makoto Tezuka for doing Urasawa's Pluto as well. That's a great project, and I think an example of what I'd love to see more of. But anyway, if this project happened any sooner, it just would have been an NFT, maybe. This is coming through a university that's studying this AI technology, and that I'm not against studying it and finding uses for it. If AI could be used to cut out certain busy work for, say, programming, and it could be reliable, maybe that is useful. If AI could reliably answer questions, that would be useful. I feel like AI is terrible at answering questions because it doesn't put any actual thought. It just pulls from sources, and it isn't figuring out if that makes sense or not. I'm mad at Google for using AI these days. Google, I was double checking something recently. I was trying to think of all the countries in Africa that started with a K, and I'm like, it's just Kenya, right? I'm going, okay, like other countries that start with K, I'm like, Kyrgyzstan, Kiribati. I was like, okay, I don't think there's any others in Africa. So I type it in. I was like, are there any other countries in Africa that start with the letter K aside from Kenya? And it gave, the first response was generated by AI, and it says, there are no other countries that start with a K sound except for the ones that start with a K sound. And like it went on from there, just talking complete gibberish nonsense. And that was the first response. I was like, Google, if I can't trust you, I'm going to just have to use somebody else. So AI, if it was reliable, I could see it like being an informational portal of sorts. I don't want AI to create my art and my stories. I don't want it to write a story. I don't want it to illustrate or paint something. I don't want that. I don't want it to create music. I don't want that. Now, could I see AI being useful for simulation renders in movies? Like the AI has been used to generate how fog will roll, and we can put in really realistic fog in the background of this scene. Great. That sounds like a useful way for AI to be utilized within the creative process, is what I'm saying. I don't want it to do other stuff. Steve Sorensen, thank you. Noam Chomsky said AI is plagiarism software. Right now it is. It's not that it has to be, but it absolutely is right now. That's all it does, is it takes what's out there without getting like anybody's permission or doing any sort of a logic check, and it just regurgitates it. That's all it does. Yeah. Hold on. Somebody said AI is better for making calculations than creations. I agree. Yeah. Well, it seems like we're mostly all on the same page. So I guess I'll end it there before I just sort of continue a boring rant. Yeah, just disappointing. To me, knowing how this was created, I don't have a lot of interest. If you told me that the guy that draws, I'm just looking for a manga here. The guy that draws Spy Family did a Blackjack chapter for its anniversary, I'd be like, cool, I'm in. Hold on, I'm having trouble charging my camera here. Let me see if I can do this right. Okay. I think it's charging now. Here's a quick one. There's something called Grand Comic Fest, and the sixth one has been canceled. So specifically, talking about Grand Island, Nebraska. I've never been. Just thought I'd mention it. They've had a Comic-Con for 5 years. They were set to have the 6th in April, but now dealers and attendees are being issued refunds. They've decided to end it. Yeah, the organizer said he's had a positive experience, but it's time for it to end. So, sorry to the folks in Nebraska. I'm sure it can be tough sometimes to get really big Comic-Cons in the certain parts of the Midwest if you're not near, like, a big, big city. Just thought I'd mention that. I tried to then look up how many Comic-Cons are there, and I couldn't find much in terms of reliable data. I'd be very curious to know exactly how many Comic-Cons are in America alone every year. So we'll see. Hand it to someone else? Well, they probably felt like that the money wasn't there, I'm assuming. Unfortunately, they couldn't get someone else to take over. So there you go. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. Did you ever go to this convention, Wayne? Or what's the biggest convention in your area? Yeah, exactly. I could ask AI, but I wouldn't trust its answer. Google says there are as many Comic-Cons as there are comic conventions in North America. Thanks, AI. How many Comic-Cons are there? There are as many Comic-Cons as there are Comic-Cons. That's the kind of answers you get. There are 323 conventions per month in the U.S. alone. 323 a month? Well, not comic conventions. Anyway, we'll move on. This could be fun. This could be fun. A Mad magazine documentary. Mad has some amazing history. Some of the talent that's poured through the, pages of Mad magazine. It's incredible talent. From Kurtzman to Elder to Jaffe to Aragones, and even like more modern artists. Just so many cool things. I like Mad. I think it tends to speak to a slightly younger audience than where I'm at, but I loved it for a certain era of my life is all. I did. So Oscar and Emmy winning director Jessica Yu will direct a so far untitled documentary about Mad Magazine. 71 years old, by the way. DC and Warner Brothers were asked to, have permission to get access to their archives and stuff. Not only did they grant that, they stepped on board as sort of official producing partners. So, the film is currently in production, set for release next year. Could be interesting. Don't know which people they're interviewing. I sure hope it's some of the people that are still around, like Aragones and stuff. Didn't the guy who created Mad Magazine run EC Comics? Yes. Sorry, I'm so bad at names. EC Comics was Gaines. Yep. I'm shocked Cracked got a documentary before. I didn't realize Cracked had a documentary. I didn't know that. Back in the day, Mad movie parodies were the only way I could learn the plots of R-rated movies. I'm giggling, Kevin, because I totally remember that. Like going like, okay, if I sort of subtract the jokes, I think I get the plot of Top Gun, Let's see. Is it actually a Warner thing? What are the odds they delete it and write it off for their taxes? I don't think that should happen, Mike, and it's nice to see you here, buddy, because it did not start with them, okay? They're, I think, getting the producer credit because of giving access to their archives and stuff, but they're not the ones, like, footing the full bill or anything like that. It came from, like, a smaller production company. So this should be a thing that actually does happen. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know about the Cracked documentary. I don't know where you can see that. That would be interesting to know too, because it actually shared a bunch of talent, and sometimes Cracked was really, really good in terms of the artists they had. I always liked who was the guy Severin, John Severin. I really liked his work on Cracked. So there's a lot to talk about though with like, Mad's history and it started as a comic, really became a magazine so that it could bypass the weird uh, rules of the Comics Code Authority. Thank goodness it did. A lot of talented people. A lot of talented people. Moving on. Penthouse Comics is coming back, folks. So get your boners ready. And your lady boners. Don't get me wrong. Penthouse Comics had a fascinating, dark history. But at one point was definitely paying the highest page rates in the industry. Got some amazing talent, Got guys like Adam Hughes drawing sequential pages. That's not something that happens a lot. And a bunch of other guys. Kevin Nolan, like a who's who of talent at the time. I've got an episode on it on Comic Tropes. It's not monetized because it's talking about pornography comics, even though I don't really show any nudity or anything. They didn't let me monetize it, but I'd still appreciate it if you watched it. Good. I'm glad that cartoonist kayfabe is talking them up too, but so did I. But I love those guys. So yeah, we're getting a new Penthouse Comics. How's that exactly happening though? Because I mean, of course, the comic ended a long time ago. Not exactly. No, not. It's not that explicit, or at least it wasn't back in the day. It's a group called Behemoth Comics, which is basically just two guys in the industry. They got the official license from Penthouse to make Penthouse Comics again, and they're going to be publishing it through Massive Publishing. That's set for Valentine's Day release, February 14th, 2024. It's going to be basically $10 bi-monthly, so once every 2 months, 6 issues a year, 96-page comic. It says it's going to have action, crime, thriller, printed oversized like a traditional magazine as compared to comic book size, but $10 for 96 pages of full-color comics, good value. Yes, it's all going to be sort of sexified, but it should have some really good talent as well. Some of the creators, and they listed a bunch, and a bunch of them are also European creators that I'm not as familiar with, but I think some of these names you'll recognize. Matteo Scalera, Tula Latte, Jay Lee, just a few of them. A lot of Penthouse would be fairly tame. I mean, there was a bunch of nudity, but it wasn't that explicit. It was more tongue-in-cheek and stuff like that. They found a way to sort of have sexiness and everything, but they did a bunch of different genres. They did superhero, they did crime and spy and thriller. So they did a lot. So yeah, with Heavy Metal in limbo, this should be a nice replacement. Yeah, but of course, remember, Heavy Metal was also going to be coming out through Massive Publishing, and then that fell apart. So hopefully this is, for people that want to read this stuff, a better story than that. I don't know. More explicit than Vampirella, because that typically doesn't really have much in the way of nudity or anything. This would have like, sex and stuff, but yeah. $10 for 96 pages these days is a pretty darn good value. Imagine paying $1 for like 9 or 10 pages. I mean, that's a good value. I don't know that I'm necessarily excited for it, but it is. I'm excited for anything where creators can get paid well and a comic is coming out at a good price. So anything that's good for the industry is good for everybody. We'll see. I'm certainly not here to kink shame anybody. I made an episode about Penthouse Comics, and just to be clear, I bought some of those back in the day. There was some amazing talent. I don't really get turned on by drawings. I can appreciate a well-rendered drawing, but I wouldn't say it turns me on. But if that's what, there's a lot of different reasons you could appreciate it. You could appreciate it for good art. Maybe you just like these types of stories. Maybe it does turn you on, and that's fine. There's a lot of different ways people would appreciate it. What was neat about the older Penthouse comics and Men's Adventure comics, that was also by Penthouse, was that they didn't always feature sexually explicit material. That's true. There were a sort of small handful of stories that were just sci-fi. There was like a cool sort of like NASA adventure story in one. They published Omni Comics. That was more sci-fi. I feel called out. Well, I'm not trying to call anybody out. Adam Hughes is great in those early issues. Penthouse Comics coming back could be great for online, not safe for work artists' careers. I guess so, yeah. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of artists who people would love to see work on something like this, you know? Wouldn't, for instance, who are some other people that draw like really pretty, like Terry Dodson, right? I think people would love to see Terry Dodson do a comic for something like this. And, hopefully it pays well because it's put out as a magazine instead of a comic. Maybe, it's going to reach a whole different audience. I'm going to talk about something international that struck me as very interesting. I don't feel like I get to talk about comics from India a lot. Oh, yeah. An art germ cover, that would sell. That would sell. But let me talk about this, because this is an artist from India who's starting a comic book school over there. Somebody said Frank Cho. All right. So this is Dilip Shabay. I'm probably mispronouncing the name. I'm sorry. But he has started a comic book school in Lucknow, India. He is the dean and one of the teachers. What you can do is sign up for 6-month certificate courses in things like character design, comic illustration, and digital art. This gentleman has 30 years of experience working on comics, started drawing for Raj Comics in the 90s. I did do an episode talking about some of Raj Comics, specifically Nagraj. That they were the biggest company in the 90s, and they're still around. He had an interesting quote that I thought was worth pointing out. So, comic artwork in India is relatively poor compared to the Marvels, DCs of the world. And this has been the key factor as to why our Indian comic industry has never taken off. The main reason why the quality of comic art has been relatively poor is the lack of formal comic art education, skill-based learning techniques, and proper resources that enable students to become top artists and make a successful career in art. I think that there's something there. I think that, there's some interesting ideas in Indian comics. When I look at them, I'm always like, the art reminds me of when there was a glut of books in the 90s and you saw a lot of people working that weren't quite up to professional standards, but were still getting published by big publishers. I do see that a lot in it looks sort of derivative when I look at certain Indian superhero comics. I'm sure there is some top talent there, but I bet that some of the talent that's already there could be brought to that next level with some proper training and education. So I hope that this is a good thing. I really do. Hello, no one. I hope it's a good thing. It's interesting anyway. Good luck to India. And continuing with, sorry, I'll just mention this. Let's say this is a great idea. I hope it gets expanded upon, even if it's through a digital platform. Yeah, right now it's an actual school, but yeah. All right. So a survey revealed an age trend as to digital comics readers that is not what you're going to expect by default. So specifically, this group called Oricon ME, they conducted a survey of, and this is a somewhat small sample size in my opinion, I will say that, but 10,438 e-comics readers. The respondents were between the ages of 15 to 79, and they all had to read e-comics at least once per week. This was in Japan specifically. So the age demographic that subscribed most frequently for these services, e-comics reading, at 50.5% of the whole population that they interviewed, in their 50s, people in their 50s. More than 50% of e-comics readers were guys in their 50s. Conversely, the age group that subscribed least frequently at 6.2% was those between 10 to 19 years old. You would think the younger generation is the ones that want to read digitally as compared to the hard copies. No, apparently that is not what the data is showing. The data is showing that it's people in their 50s are the ones that are reading it the most. There's a little bit more to this that I thought was interesting. 51% of those in their 50s responded that they read e-comics almost every day, compared to 50.6% in their 60s, 45.9% in their 40s, and then even less frequently as you get younger. So basically 40s through 60s, those folks are reading at least once a day through digital comics. Who would have guessed? Who would have guessed? What does this tell me? Well, with how big Webtoons is in South Korea, and the fact that, publishers like Shueisha have launched Shonen Jump Plus online, I think that there's a lot of growth potential in digital comics. I really do. Whether that's your favorite thing or not, all I can say is I think that there is a lot of money on the table with doing things that way. I think that there is something to be said for some people enjoying the experience of reading and setting aside the collecting aspect, setting aside the idea of having physical things. They just like to read a good story. And so for them, a digital comic reader can be pretty easy to take with you anywhere. I understand it. I do understand it. Maybe I am 50. Given Japan's aging population, this isn't all that surprising. Fair enough. We don't know the full breakdown of those 10,000 plus people, whether that was like an even divide across people. There's a lot of things that I'd be curious about to understand the methodology of this survey. That I did not see anything I could read about the methodology. So I'm putting this out here as a potential data point, more of like a conversation starter, rather than telling you this is an absolute fact, take this to the bank and cash it, you're good. But I think that there's a piece of it that makes sense. There's a piece of it that does ring true to me, that there could be people like in sort of my age bracket that are going towards, I still will always love to read comics. I don't feel the need to physically collect them. That might be a thing. Might be. That's fair. Yep. There's a bunch of questions, folks. There's a bunch of questions. The boomers are loving their tablets and other tech toys. That's the thing. People are aging up. And it sounds weird to say like, oh man, a guy in his 50s, but a guy in his 50s has still been like using computers like every day for like 30 years or something. So like they've come up with the technology too. Like they've grown with the technology. It makes some sense. It makes some sense. You switched for storage purposes. I get that. Yeah. I think that sometimes, I get a certain amount of comics digitally, especially for my review purposes. I do get a fair amount digitally. I'm both spiritually 50 and an iPad baby. Does that count? That counts. 70? Thank you. I can't believe you think I look that young. Thank you. Hey, a lot of people prefer different things. If you ask me, do I prefer the reading experience of a physical book? The answer is yes. I do prefer being able to sort of zoom with my eyes as compared to my fingers. But I do also understand the idea of having less clutter at this age as I get older. Thank you for confirming, Lloyd. Yeah, I age in comic book time. I'm 70 now, but 20 years from now, I'm only going to be 72. Let's do the last few news items and then talk about comics. The rumor is that Disney is seriously considering some second seasons for some of their shows. Let's talk about that. So this comes from Daniel Rickman, an industry scoopster, but one that does have a pretty great track record, I will say. So this is a rumor and treated as such, but he has a pretty good track record, and this strikes me as making sense. He says Marvel Studios is currently discussing potential second seasons for Ms. Marvel, Moon Knight, and She-Hulk. We'll see. Related note, Kevin Feige, the head of Marvel Studios, he recently shut down and changed Daredevil to have a traditional TV show showrunner. When Marvel Studios started doing their TV shows, they produced them like they would with a movie. They'd have sort of a head writer and they'd have directors, and those people would all collaborate to come out with episodes. It's a little weird, to be honest. There's a traditional way of doing TV here in America where there's one person that's usually called technically like an executive producer, but the sometimes informal, sometimes formal title is showrunner. There's one person or a collaboration maybe between two people that oversee the entire show. They manage the writer's room. They work hand in hand with the directors to make sure that there's a clear, consistent vision. It's a little different than a head writer is just sort of managing the writer's room, and then they're handing things over to a director who's in charge of everything. In movies, a director is like the top, but in TV, it's more of a producer is the top. So Marvel is changing that. They changed that with Daredevil, and moving forward, they're trying to do it more like traditional TV, which makes a lot of sense because it's proven to work. So, this is another interesting quote Kevin Feige had earlier in this year that I'm going to mention. He said that he'd like to see Marvel moving towards doing more episodic TV as compared to serialized stuff. I like that idea personally. He said, quote, "You certainly want to keep people engaged, but I'm a big Star Trek fan and I still find it soothing to watch an episode of Next Gen with a beginning and an end. So I think we're going to keep experimenting with that going forward." Okay. I also thought that, like, considering, who they had as Moon Knight, that Moon Knight was kind of underwhelming. Yeah, I didn't love it. The Netflix shows were not produced by Marvel Studios. Marvel, the company, oversaw them, and technically they were supposed to be sort of integrated, but Marvel Television was a completely separate business unit with Jeff Loeb overseeing everything. And that's why the Netflix and the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Cloak and Dagger and the Runaways and all that stuff didn't really cross over too much with the MCU. Whereas obviously stuff like WandaVision and Miss Marvel is crossing over in much more explicit ways. I hope that makes sense. Maybe villain of the week, or maybe like a big bad that you get 5 to 10 minutes of moving a story forward each episode, but mostly like a self-contained sort of thing. Maybe. Okay. So I did not hate Moon Knight, but I didn't love it. But Clay loved it, and more power to you. Moon Knight was great up to the finale. Felt a little bottleneck to me, like they were scared to try new things. Maybe. I just wanted, honestly, only thing I would have liked a little bit more action. I would have liked a little bit more fight scene stuff. Throw in Bushmaster for like a 2-episode arc, something like that. All right. This is a book that I did not read the first volume of, but seeing this sort of press come out for the second volume of this, I'm pretty interested in. We're talking about a sort of Chinese vampire mythology, a graphic novel about that. So, following their widely praised reimagining of Le Fanu's Gothic novella, writer Amy Chu and artist Su Li return to their tale of obsession, vampires, and Chinese folklore in Carmilla, the Last Vampire Hunter. And that's set for this coming July. By the way, edited by Karen Berger. That's the thing that first caught my attention because I really appreciate her tastes. I've said many times how she made Vertigo. She's a tastemaker. And it's going to be priced at $19.99. It's about a social worker turned vampire hunter who lost everyone she cared about in the first volume, apparently, and she's rebuilding her life and hunting vampires in San Francisco's Chinatown. But I like that a lot of different cultures have a vampire mythology, and it can be very different. Chinese vampires like often hop, and you can like sort of stop them with like, printed scrolls and things like that. They're a little bit different than just bloodsuckers, but I don't know. So that could be interesting. I don't know if they use all of that in these books or not, but I'd be curious to learn some other mythology. It sounded cool. So I thought I'd put that out there. Maybe you want to read the first volume of Carmilla before volume 2 comes out in July. Putting it on people's radar. Last thing I will talk about is another thing to put on people's radar. This sounded a little interesting to me. Marvel previewed their new Luke Cage comic book. Pretty good art, by the way, on the cover here. I don't know who the cover artist was, I'm afraid. But this book will be written by Rodney Barnes, art by Ramon Box, and that starts this week. So Wednesday, Luke Cage #1 comes out, a new Luke Cage book. This is going to be set during the Spider-Man event Gang War, which is basically all the sort of Spider-Man crime bosses, Hammerhead and Hobgoblin and White Rabbit, and I don't know who else. The Rose, probably, people like that. They're all fighting over who's going to control New York's underworld. Spider-Man is going to be gathering together a bunch of allies, sort of street level and spider related superheroes to fight back against all these enemies. Could be fun. Oh, Chinese vampires are called Jingxi. I didn't know. Oh, throw rice at a vampire and they have to pick up and count them. Isn't that for regular, like sort of European vampires? But anyway. Luke Cage will fight for the meter maids. That's what he's doing. Apparently, in the current Marvel history, Luke Cage is now the mayor of New York. I think I knew that, but hadn't really been following super closely. But this will start with his old friend, Danny Rand, Iron Fist, getting him to realize that he still needs to solve problems by punching people. So that's what's going to happen. He's going to get back on the streets. Literally the least I can do right now. You're a hero. Dude, thank you for the super chat. That's so kind of you. I really, really appreciate that. That's nice. That's really cool. I love Danny and Luke Cage's friendship because they're so different. They're so different. From education to wealth to their culture, or even how they were raised. And the fact that they just get along. They just like each other and they like doing stuff together. They get on each other's nerves, but that they just like each other. I like that. I don't see a lot of superhero duos that aren't hero and sidekick. There's not a lot like that. There are some. There are some good ones. I think that there have been good eras of, say, Captain America and Falcon. I wouldn't really call Falcon a sidekick there. I'd call that they had a buddy cop type book for a long time. But anyway, so I just thought I'd mention it. Maybe it's good, maybe not. I don't know. Let me set up a camera so that we can take a look at the comics that came out this week, because I have opinions. And my opinions will soon be your opinions. That's how it works, right? Just trying to figure out how I plug this in. There we go. And that. Switch up some cabling. Bear with me. I just need to rejigger a few wires this week. I feel like Geordie figuring out some sort of technical problem on the Enterprise. If I reroute the positive syntax frequency through an updated pylon interface, I might be able to get the tachyon emissions to reroute through the deflector dish. Or maybe not. Adjust the camera here a little. That looks damned good. Wait, that's not the right one. That's it. Haha! Success! Success. I'll try to do some of these reviews quickly. Not yet, Keith. Maybe tonight. And I am giving some serious thought to rushing a comic tropes video into production to discuss what was adapted from the comic and stuff, because I am familiar with the comic. I do have that. I want to talk about this book, The Holy Roller. I'll always give Rick Remender a shot at anything. He's earned a lot of goodwill from me over the years. But it is interesting. He's got 2 co-writers on this book. Famous Hollywood folks. We've got Andy Samberg. I think everybody knows Andy Samberg from his movies and SNL and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Joe Trohman. I know he's a musician. Is this the guy from Fall Out Boy, folks? I should have double-checked. I don't know that one off the top of my head. I think that's what he's from. And Roland Boschi on art. Roland has done work for Rick before. So, we've got a superhero with a bowling ball. Well, it's called the Holy Roller. We can sort of get where this is going. This is a book with some humor, but I would say that it's not quite the satire that the Scumbag was. We've got this Jewish kid as the main character. He's treated badly by the rich white people in his tiny little town in where was it? I'm just double checking the town that he grew up in. A town called Cloville, Ohio. This is 1986 when it starts. Then we jump forward and the guy's been bumming around with Greenpeace for like 20 years, not really doing anything with his life, but you know, he is athletic and he is a smart guy. He's an underachiever. And the fact that he's drawn to a little bit look like Andy Samberg, potentially, not like directly, but like maybe, means like they might be thinking of where they could go with this. Anyway, like he learns that his father is sick, so he hasn't been home in like 20 years. He goes, 20 years, I think he's been away from, he goes back and his town is in terrible shape. Just terrible. His old synagogue has been turned into like a fast food place. He connects for a little bit with his dad, but like ultimately he gets confronted by the rich town snobs by this issue, and just sort of bashes them to hell with his dad's bowling ball that he happens to have. And I guess that's his origin story for becoming a small town superhero. The art is good. It's a darker satire than you might think, though. I mean, it is really coming down on how, small town America can really be falling apart. You know, we're dealing with some polarizing views on, you know, not just politics, but bigotry and, you know, a greater divide between the super wealthy and the super poor. Not as much of a middle class as there used to be. So it is talking about some pretty relevant social themes. At the same time, at the end of the day, these are some funny people. The dialogue is funny. And you're dealing with a guy who's deciding to stop crime by just bashing people's heads in with a bowling ball. All right. So it is pretty over the top in some ways. It's not, straight to the point. It's not subtle per se, but it also isn't, it's interesting. It's interesting is all I'll say. The characters are interesting. I saw this on the rack. If I saw this on the rack, I'd have to get it. It's good. It's very good. Could somebody just double check, look up who Joe Trohman is? Am I right thinking that he's from Fall Out Boy? Because that's not a band I listen to, but that's what's sticking in the back of my mind. I hope I have that right. And it's just about a part of America that I don't think gets covered a lot in fiction or superhero fiction. You know, everything is set in LA, New York, maybe Chicago, or, you know, in rare cases, you get like your Detroits and your New Orleans and your Bostons. But generally a lot of the stuff is, in the biggest cities, maybe Pittsburgh or Philly, maybe. But, the Ohio's and your Nebraskas and Iowas and Colorados, they don't get mentioned a whole lot, but that's interesting. Okay. Fallout. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. Wouldn't have expected these guys to work together. Rick travels in some interesting circles. Tell you what, I'll have Rick on this show in the near future at the beginning of the show, and we'll talk a little bit about how he got this team together for Holy Roller and what he's thinking about with Holy Roller. And what's his other book that I really like right now? The Sacrificers. The Sacrificers is really cool. Big fantasy stuff. So we'll see. Here's one I didn't like so much, to be honest. Boy, did I want to. I think anybody that has watched my shows for a while knows I love big monsters. I like Godzilla a lot. I like King Kong. I like a lot of the monsters that are in the Godzilla movies, like Rodan and King Ghidorah and Destoroyah. I like Pacific Rim. That stuff's my jam, man. So I was up for this. The idea of having the Justice League battle Godzilla and King Kong. Sadly, it just doesn't live up to my expectations. And maybe that's my fault, but I don't like it. The artist is both talented and confuses me with his storytelling. Also, page one here, and I just got to say, for somebody who normally, these are what he draws for superheroes, okay? Let me just let it focus. Okay, that looks good, right? That looks like, good superhero fare. So why then, when he draws this Godzilla, is this just so clearly, the images from the movies sort of maybe digitally manipulated a little? Or maybe it's just done in Photoshop. You know what I mean? It's just tonally, this art versus this art, the shading doesn't even match. Look, there's next to no texture or shading on Superman, whereas Godzilla has all this sort of dark shadows. It's I don't mind reference, but I just want some tonal consistency, at least within the same panel. And I feel like I'm not getting that. Sorry, it looks like I'm getting a little lag on my camera, folks. I'm sorry. Superman punches Godzilla, and that's good. But then we sort of get sidetracked with just other, sort of lesser monsters and how the Justice League is running around, sort of dealing with them. Kind of not that much action happening, though. Just sort of threats of what could happen. It's set in a vague continuity where it's not really up to date or anything. Superman isn't married, but Jason does exist as Red Hood, and I don't know. He messes up by shooting this bat creature before they're ready to attack it. Somehow Black Canary takes it out by yelling at it, but they need to engineer, sort of an amplifier. I guess that's fine. That's fine. I would just say, and then look, even though now it's nighttime, all the rendering is still the exact same as how it was, with the sun still out here. It's rendered the exact same way. Maybe I'm being overly critical. I wanted a little more action and just a little more consistency with the art. That's all I wanted. Here's a Batman book with some monsters that works. Godzilla is just stills from the movies. That's what it looks like. And like I say, sometimes reference is good. It can speed up your process, but you have to make it look like your style, at least. Know when to add and when to subtract so that everything fits. If you use those poses and sort of the outlines or something, maybe that's fine. It's not just you. I had a very similar opinion. It's like they tried to do too much and missed the obvious tropes, comic tropes even. I just wanted more action in it, man. Look, if you have an amazing story and you're going to surprise me, go for it. But I don't look at Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong and think this needs to be, I'm not going to read it unless I get something, like really deep and resonant and emotional. I'm kind of reading it for some big monsters and superheroes just punching each other through whole buildings. I want to see some carnage essentially out of something like this. That's what we kind of all like for the finale of most Godzilla movies, is just the spectacle of it. The spectacle. I don't want what would be cool is, imagine if these titans were battling and all the superheroes could really do was race around saving lives out of all the workers that are in these buildings and clearing people off the street. That would be amazing to me. They're like, I could punch out Godzilla, but I don't have time because I have to keep saving lives, save every life. That would be interesting. A sort of a ground level, like, I'm just trying to like keep my head above water, saving all these people that are about to get crushed by all sorts of like debris and stomps and laser blasts or atomic breath. And we need to like strategize, but there's no time. There's just no time. That would be interesting to me. Simple as that. That is simple, but that's what I would do. Don't blame the artist. Someone from Toho said it's a third party at play. It's not Toho or DC. It's probably Legendary, I guess. I don't know. Are any of the hero poses porn traces? No. I think that whoever is I think it's Christian Duce or Duce or Deuce. I don't know how to pronounce the name. Sorry. I don't think any of the superhero stuff is like traced or referenced. I think that, like, this person can draw well. I'm not saying that he can't. But I also don't think that the panel-to-panel storytelling is always clear. Sometimes things are just a little too distant. There's not always enough of an establishing shot for my tastes. But it's not abominable or anything like that. I'm not trying to tear that down. It's just that not enough happens with the action. But this is fun. This is a blast. Batman Off-World, written by Jason Aaron, art by Doug Mahnke, who draws monsters and stuff. Great. This, we don't exactly know the full how and why, but Batman has gone off-world in this tiny little ship, and it's been abducted by these sort of pirates that press gang whoever they come across into becoming soldiers, that the mercenaries that they sell off as slaves. And Batman can do some pretty good damage to, some of the robots and flunkies that work on the ship, but he does not stand a chance against the boss of the ship, a really big monster. Batman, it's Batman in space, man. He's out of his element. This is Batman early in his career. This is just its own story. It's a blast. He's got all these other sort of like, slaves that are like, guess what? You mop floors now, man. And he's keeping it to himself, exactly what he's trying to do. While he's cleaning, Batman puts together like a training robot and uses it to slowly gather information while he's like mopping floors and stuff. He's asking this training bot about, the little bit of information that he has on some of these aliens. It knows how to fight people, so it eventually, can tell him things like, oh, this alien has a third kidney and its weak spot is like just above that. But by the way, you're not strong enough to hit it to do much damage. And he's like, I'll worry about that later. For now, I'm gathering information. It's a clever Batman that's definitely out of his element. It's a Batman that's way out of his element, has just no real chance physically against these opponents. So he's going to have to plan long term. And that's going to be hard because he's being kept very busy and working on very low rations and stuff. I don't know where it's going. It looks good. It's exciting to see Batman try to figure out his way out of a problem that's literally completely alien to him. We know Batman can solve riddles and throw batarangs to stop guys with guns and knock out, muggers. What's he do against aliens that he doesn't know their biology? He doesn't know their technology. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't have allies. You know, they've stripped him of all his gadgets. It's an interesting idea. It's a fun thing where you also don't have to be like, oh, and this crosses over with Nightmare issue 73 and Teen Titans blasts off 4. You know, it's none of that. None of that. Batman's reasoning for being off-world is really pretty funny and badass. They hint at some of it, but yeah. he can't breathe in space. He's on a spaceship, and he talks about how the artificial gravity throws him off too. So, pretty good. Also, fun, not necessarily deep, but fun. World's Finest has built up to Batman and Superman crossing over into the early days of the Kingdom Come universe, where nobody else seems to know about parallel worlds. And hey, who knows about Kingdom Come better than its writer, Mark Waid? And you've got art by Dan Mora. So does it look fantastic? Of course it does, folks. It's such a good fit for a book like this. The heroes look like heroes. The storytelling is nice and clear. The emotions on people's faces read nice. And you've got you've got Superman going up against a more experienced Superman. You've got Batman going up against a more experienced Batman. And in the middle of all of this, this kid called Boy Thunder or Thunderman, that Batman and Superman were training as sort of a sidekick or something, but who got sent into a parallel world, this parallel world. And he's not happy about it. Look, it's just fun adventure, okay? What else can I say? But if all you're looking for is fun adventure comics, you can do so much worse than Mark Waid and Dan Mora. What a creative team. They just make it look good. Look at these hero shots. That's good storytelling, though, because it's not just a splash page. We've got insets of some fight moves, and it reads very clearly. It reads very clearly panel to panel. You know, we know when to just sort of lower the angle just enough to sort of show that the focus is more on Batman picking something up than his whole body or something, and then we'd miss whatever small thing he's picking up. It's good. It's good, subtle decision-making for storytelling. I also like Superman here loses his temper for a moment, and he punches apart a small shack. And that's just some nice detail there. Is it going to focus? Look at those lines. That's a lot of power. Hey, super chat. Weekly gold, silver, bronze. All right, sir. Let's go with the current book topic, Mark Waid books. Okay, so I'm saying the top 3 Mark Waid books that are out there. Top 3. Kingdom Come. The Flash. Captain America. Those are my top 3 Mark Waid books. But this is a contender. I just would like to see a little bit more of where it goes. I recommend this. This book, Wonder Woman, has stealth become my favorite superhero book. Was not expecting anything like that. I really like it. I really like it. It's written by Tom King, art by Daniel Sampere, and the general thing that's going on is Wonder Woman versus the U.S. government, mostly the army. And mostly headed by Sergeant Steele. Let's see if we can find him. And I'll... But there's something behind the scenes that I'm going to sort of explain. Okay, so yeah. There's Sergeant Steele. And you can see Wonder Woman is not too intimidated by a gun being aimed at her. It's going to take a lot more than a gun to intimidate Wonder Woman. She's very confident here. I like this scene where Wonder Woman breaks into something like a CIA type building, and she's going up an elevator to talk to Sergeant Steele, and this guard feels obligated to try to stop her. She just sort of casually kicks it. She specifically though, it's funny, and this panel grid really helps play the comedy scene. She's like, "Can you please press number 32 button for me? Thank you." Instead, he pulls a gun. She has to kick him out, reach over his awkwardly slumped body. It's really good. Let's zoom in on that. That's a really good pose on the slumped body. And you've got the music playing behind all that. Anyway, some good action scenes. The artwork is great. Look at how casual like Wonder Woman is about just regular guns. That's she's wiping her eye. These decisions that Daniel Sampere does to just sort of show some personality. You're not going to see that with a lot of artists, you know? Like, have you ever seen a Rob Liefeld Deadpool comic where, you know, Deadpool is just sort of like, getting his eye while he's deflecting bullets or something? You don't see that. It's subtle, but it's good. But here's what I really like about it, okay? They've come up with a new villain. There's a reason why the government would be against Wonder Woman, where they should sort of trust her. Wonder Woman's done so much good that they should have more goodwill. There's this crusty old man who's basically old money. Hold on. I'm having trouble with my Twitch stream, unfortunately. Sorry. This guy possesses something called the lasso of lies. You know how Wonder Woman has the lasso of truth? Well, apparently it has an opposite out there. And this has allowed him and his family to manipulate people when necessary throughout the course of American history. They came over here as colonial conquerors, and they've subtly influenced politics and governments whenever they need to. Mostly they leave things alone. I'm curious to see more. I'm curious to see what put Wonder Woman on this guy's radar, but it's pretty good. Oh, look at this. This is Wonder Woman having her invisible jet decloak outside of Sergeant Steele's window. Look at that. 2-page spread, folks. That's how you use storytelling in comics effectively. A reveal like this, given this much space, carries a lot of weight. And Daniel Sampere has used like the sort of a comic book grid to sort of imply some time passing, but it's really like the window panels. So it's diegetic panels. Diegetic panels. And there is a backup story here that jumps into the somewhere in the future where John Kent and Damian Wayne are babysitting young Trinity, Wonder Woman's future daughter. And she goes on an adventure as Wonder Robin with Damian Wayne. And she's pretty funny and adorable. And at the same time, Damian Wayne and Superboy are both really nervous about her learning curse words from them because they do not want to be in trouble with Wonder Woman. Yes, diegetic was a $10 word. Folks, I didn't expect it to be so good. I've been enjoying a bunch of things that Tom King has done lately. But I find his Wonder Woman very likable, actually, as she investigates a mystery. And, yeah, you know what? I've got like a little bit more nostalgic affection for Marvel superheroes over DC superheroes. But let's take a look at the last 3 books that I just looked at from DC. Daniel Sampere on Wonder Woman. Dan Mora on World's Finest. Doug Mahnke on Batman Off-World. DC has a killer stable of talent right now. And because of their sort of Dawn of DC initiative, they've basically relaunched a lot of their books. It's a soft reboot, but it's just a fresh starting point with new creative teams for most of their books. It's a decent time to try out DC. Oh, the name of this artist is Daniel Sampere. Let me find the credits page. Oh, it's printed really small, so that's not going to really help much. Very good artist. Very good artist. Like, I'm sorry, but this Wonder Woman is the kind of like beauty that you could imagine almost anybody just going like falling for. I believe that. He makes Wonder Woman look strong. She's got like some beefy arms, but she's still got a good figure and a really just, kind eyes. He draws her with kind eyes. But look, here's just Wonder Woman striding around. She looks feminine but strong. I think the artist is doing a good balancing act, and she looks consistent. A lot of artists have challenge with same face syndrome, but also they have challenges making a character like always look consistent. And Wonder Woman looks very consistent. This is a really good artist who had not been on my radar before this book. Yes, thank you for pointing that out, Owen's Reviews. The backup is by Balin Ortega. Very good art. Very good. I'll try to be quicker with the rest of these and just sort of like say whether I recommend it or not. Incredible Hulk. Yeah. Philip Kennedy Johnson writing, Nick Klein on art. And the current thing is just that like there are all these monsters that are being like controlled by the mother of all monsters. And for some reason, which we don't know yet, all hunting down the Hulk. So while the Hulk is on the run, he's being chased by monsters, and he has this young runaway tagging along with him. So he's got to watch out for her too. And at the very end of this issue, oh, by the way, let me pause. Some great body horror. Hulk and Banner are not getting along these days. They're not getting along at all. And so when Hulk comes out, he doesn't just transform. He transforms in really like body horror twisting ways. Like in this, he sort of grows out from just under Banner's skin and sort of bursts out of it, just to sort of probably cause a little bit of pain to Banner as he does that. And then some kid gets a kid goes on a World War II era motorcycle and somehow becomes Ghost Rider. But this is definitely some sort of a new force. Because like the Hulk is like that. You're no Ghost Rider I've ever seen. We've got like a World War II styled Ghost Rider fighting Hulk. And that's just sort of how it ends. But I can't wait to see how it continues. Ouch. Some pretty good art by Nick Klein, right? The bugging eyes and the tearing skin. Meanwhile, Hulk also shows up in She-Hulk issue 2. Rainbow Rowell still writing a lovely sort of romantic workplace comedy type take. And like Hulk is saying like, like leave me alone, don't help. And she's like, I always help you, but if you're going to be like this, fine, solve your own problems. I'll leave it at that. It gets a little bit into how one-sided the She-Hulk relationship is in terms of how Jennifer is always helping her cousin, but like Hulk never really appreciates it. But this is like a charmingly light adventure book with some good romance, and I like it. I do. Only issue I have is that the beautiful ending from Immortal Hulk is kind of undone. Hulk and Banner are at odds again. Oh well. That was sort of undone, though, with the Donny Cates book, where all of a sudden Banner had, like, captured Hulk and used him as an engine. So I think that this sort of had to, like, reset and come out of that. So, yes, it's a reset, but it's a good story. I know, I did like seeing them interacting like family. No One continues to be a good crime thriller. Some people that they're looking for a killer, but they're also looking for who's this vigilante called No One. The people at the newspaper have put out some names of possible No One suspects through their podcast, which, by the way, is an actual podcast that you can literally listen to. Do they have the link here? Where is it? Yeah. At the end of every issue of No One, there's a link to get the latest podcast where they've got a full voice cast. Todd Stashwick, Yuri Lowenthal, Rachel Lee Cook, Patton Oswalt, Lauren Lester. Great voice cast. But the podcast put out some names of potential vigilante suspects. And so the killer has killed one of them. And now yeah, they're all being targeted. They're all being targeted. The people that like might be this vigilante. So we finally get a brief fight between No One, the vigilante, and this anonymous killer. It's a mystery who both of them are, and the newspapers and the cops are trying to solve this. We've got our suspects. Every issue has like the main characters in the back with like a description of who they are. It's pretty interesting stuff. It's a good crime thriller. No One is so good. Yuri Lowenthal. I know, Yuri Lowenthal. But also, like, Patton Oswalt's really good in this. Rachel Lee Cook's good. Todd Stashwick. Also, I love how issue 6 showed the fallout and consequences of the Who Is No One podcast and how it's becoming more intertwined with the story of the book. Yes, wouldn't say it's 100% essential to listen to the podcast, but it's rewarding. It's very rewarding. It works very well together, and it does something that you can't always do in comics, right? You can't do audio. You can't have music. You can't have voices. But you could have a related piece of media, and they've integrated that very closely, and it's to great effect. Very well produced. I wish I had something lovely to say about Void Rivals issue 6, but I'll be honest. It just, like, it looks good. It's not outright bad, but Void Rivals isn't as interesting to me as the Transformers book. When I was growing up watching the Transformers cartoon, season 3 was definitely a big step down over the first 2 seasons because I didn't like some of the new characters or the futuristic setting. I just was never super in love with the Quintessons and stuff as new enemies. But they're kind of a big part, like, of what's happening in Void Rivals because that's happening out in space, so it's easy to use those elements. It looks good. It's got some good action scenes, but I would just call this all very sort of boilerplate. But does it look good? Absolutely. Like, look at this chase scene with 2 sort of frenemies on a motorcycle being chased by drones. That does look good. I'm not saying that it doesn't look good. I don't know. Maybe it'll hook me a little bit more. So far, it hasn't super hooked me. Last book I picked up, to be clear, is Dracula. And this has a lot of good things behind it for folks. But how much you'll enjoy it depends on how much you already like Dracula, to be honest. I wouldn't recommend this as your first Dracula media because it's based on the Universal Monsters original movie Dracula. It's literally based on that characterization and look. It's licensed from them. So it's not really based off of the original book. It's based off the movie, okay? But James Tynion is writing it, and Martin Simmons is drawing it. Great talent, especially for a creepy horror book like this. And what they do differently is they focus on a lot of the supporting cast. We get a lot more time with Renfield. We get a lot more time with characters like Lucy and Mina and Dr. Seward. And if you already know the movie, it's very interesting to sort of see these characters interact in scenes that absolutely feel like they would be part of that movie, but that we just didn't get to see. But it's interesting seeing these characters learn the nature of the threat around them and how disbelieving they are. Makes sense. It looks good too. It just looks good. Here's Lucy is, captivated by this new Count Dracula and essentially invites him into her room. And it's surreal and dark and kind of sexy, which it should be. And Renfield is just a freak. He's locked up, of course, at the asylum at this point, and he's just sort of begging for his master to imbue him with the power that he's been promised. We've got Dr. Seward trying to make sense of what's happening with Renfield and, sort of saying that this Professor Von Helsing sounds like he's nuts, but that he acknowledges he's missing something here. The blood is so vivid. So if you haven't read Dracula or you haven't seen the Dracula movie, this would probably be a slightly awkward way to get into it. Okay? It wouldn't be my recommendation of where to start. But if you've seen that movie, and I recommend it, this is a really good supplemental story to it. The characters feel very different and real. It's good. Who's my favorite Universal monster? Mine is the Invisible Man. My favorite monster, my favorite overall movie would probably be Frankenstein, first of all. My favorite monster would probably be Dracula. But visually, I will say there's a lot that I love about the creature from the Black Lagoon. Just awesome. A bunch of people saying that, like, the Wolfman. Totally get that. Totally get that. Never heard of this. What's his name? Dracula. You got it. Red is Dracula's power. God. But I think that that's all I've got to talk about for comics this week. My strongest recommendations of the week are going to be Wonder Woman, Batman Off-World, and Justice League King Kong. No. Holy Roller, probably. I'm curious to see where this goes. But there's a lot that I liked, obviously, this week. There's a lot that I really enjoyed. I think the Hulk books are good these days. I think World's Finest is fun. So it's a good time to be reading comics. I'm gonna call it a night now because I think I need to use the bathroom. How's that for a closer? I hope you'll consider checking out the latest Comic Tropes episode, which I did a little differently. A roundtable discussion of Invincible with guests Comic Drake and Godzilla Mendoza. I think that they have some interesting insights that didn't necessarily occur to me. Yeah, I'm looking forward to coming back next week. I think what I'll do right now is try to binge the latest Doctor Who episode and potentially make an episode about it. So I'm going to call it a night, folks. Thank you very much for being here. I always appreciate it. And until I see you next time, double salute. Keep reading comics. Take care. Bye.